Hello, everybody. Welcome back. It is another episode of the Dynasty Don. You already know what it is. I am here today with the incomparable at Munder Difflin FF, Scott Rinear. Scott, how you doing today?
I'm good. I'm good. Thanks for having me.
Oh
Excited
man,
to be here, chat
I'm
with
I'm
you.
so excited to have you on. We've got an incredible list of guests over the next couple of weeks, and you were like my one
Oh,
before the draft. So we're gonna get in some pre-draft predictions, some hot takes, some real spicy rookie takes if we get that far. Bold predictions, some historic draft data as we were kind of cooking up off mic beforehand. But before we get into any of that, let's drop that intro.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Brodo Fantasy Football Podcast presented by BrodoFantasy.com and the Fantasy Football by Brodo app, the only tool you need to dominate fantasy football.
You already know. I'm so happy to have you here today. This guy is one of my favorite people in the industry, both from a content perspective and a personal perspective. He's a fantasy football content creator at IBT Media, at Fantasy Data NFL, a Fantasy Sports Writer Association member, and congratulations on this, by the way, a 2022 Fantasy Sports Writer Association nominee for Best Fantasy Football Article Series of the Year. Was certainly well deserved. Yeah, again, incomparable, one of the best minds in the industry. So happy to have you here today, man.
oh, thanks, man. You're too kind. I remember at the expo last year, you were one of the first guys I wanted to, finally meet in person.
Yeah, for sure.
I was not disappointed. So,
Likewise.
are you going again this year?
I wish I could. I've got some
Okay.
life things in the way. I might be moving
Yeah.
back to the East Coast, so like literally right at
Interesting.
that time. Yeah, so that's a thing that's going to happen. Kind of some personal news for the fans, but yeah. So I really wanted to go. I think me and the partner lady friend are going to do a little bit of a mini vacay and then essentially move our entire life from coast to coast. So that'll be taking up most of my August,
Yeah.
needless to say. Which, I mean,
Yeah.
for
Well,
those listening, the expo is absolutely phenomenal time. So many cool people, obviously like-minded individuals, and yeah, get to meet some of the best personalities in the industry. Again, the IBT crew amongst the greatest, and likewise was not disappointed when we finally got to hang out. I gotta
yeah,
ask
but
you
I mean,
though.
this is next best thing, I guess. I
Yeah.
mean, a lot of us, like for me, I joined this thing during the pandemic, threw my hat in the ring, and social media has its obvious pitfalls, but I've actually had a pretty positive experience as far as meeting people such as yourself, and for a really long time communicating via typing words, but then eventually going on shows, at least being face to face in this format. So yeah, it's good to see you again.
Yeah, me too. It took a while for me to even get confident enough to be behind the mic, but now that I am, like, I mean, we were kind of saying it off air. It's like this is just like hanging out, we're just hanging out, talking football, talking data. Both of us, kind of analytic minds. We're going to get into some stats today, obviously. Yeah, we're going to get it started off pretty hot, but before we get into it, and I know I could take all day and talk about just how much I enjoy your presence, but one of the things that first attracted me to you on social media, obviously your handle. My favorite show of all time, regardless of genre, The Office series, American and British, but because there's more of it, obviously going to lean to the American side. Don't hate me for the OGs out there. You got to tell me what your favorite moment, gif, line, anything. Hit me with your favorite Office media.
I think probably my favorite GIF, and only because I actually reenacted it with my wife. It's the scene. I don't remember the exact episode, but it's the scene where Jim and Dwight are in charge of planning Kelly's birthday. And it's the scene where he questions Dwight, like, "It is your birthday, period." And you look up and there's just like a dot matrix printed out, "It is your birthday," period, with like balloons blown up about 25%. They're brown and gray. So I just that whole episode, their dynamic together, that whole episode was just completely memorable. So it was, I don't know, it was about 8 years ago or something. My wife was at work where she wasn't here, and it was her birthday, and she came home I still have a picture. I need to dig it up. She came home. I had hung balloons that were like barely blown up, and I had printed out "It is your birthday" period and put it up on the wall. So we had a good time.
Amazing.
That's probably my favorite gift, just because I like to send that one out on people's birthdays.
And you got a little personal touch to it too. That's
yeah. And then favorite episode is tough. I really like the episode where Dwight gets the concussion when he hits the car. It's the injury where Michael steps on the George Foreman grill. That episode, to me, it's a little cringy. Michael in that episode's a little cringy, but that's always an episode when it comes on. I'm like, yes.
Yeah, that's one of
Mike's
those
whole dynamic when he's concussed with Pam. They're talking about downloading songs from some Russian website, which I did because I'm old enough to have done that.
Do you remember that?
Yeah, where you could get individual songs for 8 cents, and it was this big, huge deal. So that's it. But I mean, man, it's tough. It's tough to pick a favorite episode.
Yeah, I really like the injury episode as well. And I think that's one of those episodes that kind of embodies the entire beauty of The Office, because it's got all that heartwarming, kind of heart-wrenching of Dwight. Like, that's really the first episode that it's solidified that it's like, no, Pam, like, you're my best friend. And I love him. And like, like, I thought this was, and you kind of always have this, like, is he the protagonist in a comedy type of feel? And then that kind of breaks that fourth wall, so to speak, of saying, like, we're really a family here. And that's kind of that entire embodiment.
Yeah,
of why
I would say so. Yeah. I mean, the jokes, where do you like your foot shipped? Like that, because he comes in bubble wrap. It's just classic.
So many good
classic
ones.
stuff. Yeah.
Absolutely. I'm so glad I finally got to.
It's so funny because early on Twitter, that was kind of the deal. Like, a lot of people were like, "Oh, hey, I noticed your handle," and I was like, "That wasn't necessarily intentional.
Yeah.
This has been like my login, username, whatever you want to call it, since like the early days of like ESPN chat rooms. Back when, before Sleep, when the only place I could go to ask questions about Start Sit was like these chat rooms on the ESPN fantasy website, and I had to create and it's been Munder Difflin since like 2006. So, and it was like, at that time, it was a split-second decision. Like, I never thought it would like stick. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But it stuck for so long that when I see Dunder Mifflin the other way, I'm like, is that right?
Yeah, me too.
So, yeah, that's the right one.
No, for sure. Like, it's become, and especially because we interact and we're closer friends, like, it's become such an embodiment of who you are that I always question it, even like in the show and on memorabilia now. I'm like, wait, I'm like, is that something's off here? And then I always remember.
Well, I just ran with it because that's my whole thing on Twitter, and just here, like, obviously it's kind of weird. It's probably a little unique in that I can get so far into the analytical numbers where I'm lost, but then I can, on a dime, be joking. You know what I mean? Just like,
yep.
So I was going to say something there and then I forgot. So let's move on.
I think your point was made. Yeah. No, you've definitely got that. You've definitely got that polarization about you for sure. And I mean, speaking of polarization, maybe a poor segue, but like, we're here. We're a few days away. Like, it's the NFL draft.
Yeah.
All of the most polarizing players have been talked about, weighed, measured, quite literally, their values as well. We are mere days away, and by the time that this gets released, it'll be probably 2 days away, quite literally. So, your reactions, immediate thoughts, last chance to say it. How are you feeling about this class in general? And do you have any disappointment, so to speak, leading up to the NFL draft?
I'm pretty excited, to be honest. I mean, I never claim to be any kind of draft expert. Like, when I field questions or discuss, potential landing spots or projected landing spots, not like fantasy relevant landing spots, but just projected landing spots. And when we start talking about offensive tackles and safeties, I'm relying a lot on other people out there that do, basically do this for a living. I rely a lot on mock drafts. I look at a lot of mocks and I kind of average all the stuff together. But from what I do know, after this will be my third year really focusing and digging into the draft before it happens. It's a pretty exciting class in my opinion. Part of that I think is just due to, last year was such a disappointment with quarterbacks, and quarterbacks, especially in superflex formats, they make the world go around in fantasy football. So, it was kind of probably pretty cool to the old school, the vets of football, to see like a lot of defense in that first round last year. And there's still going to be a fair amount of defense this year. But I'm excited, for the top few quarterbacks, to have a few quarterbacks who will likely go first round, we'll likely see next year. And we won't have to go down the rabbit hole with them about the hit rates for third and fourth round quarterbacks all offseason.
Right.
You know what I mean? Because, the ones that deserve it will likely go in the first. However, little side note, for the last couple of years now, I've wanted to, it's this little side pet project of mine that I think would be really fun, to make a fantasy football calendar, like a year-long calendar, but, more of a spoofy thing, making fun of ourselves type of thing. You know what I mean? Where, there'll be a section. It's like, here's, from February to March 15th, it's analytics versus film arguments. And like, here's this, you know what I mean?
It's veterans are in the best shape of their life.
Yeah. It's quad season when training camp starts.
Yeah.
But what I want to do is, this time of year is like draft prep. And then when the draft hits, it's the day we all find out we don't know anything. You know what I mean? Like,
yep.
I just for fun looked at it a little while back. Like last year, I really dug into like mock draft stuff. And I just looked across, I tracked all these mock drafts last year and just made this whole thing about like, who is the most likely based on that to go here, 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 and here. And I decided after the draft happened, I was like, I want to look back and see how many of these mock drafters get right. In a large sample size, not very many.
Mm-hmm.
And they're not expected to. It's more about, did you get the round right more than the exact pick right?
Right.
But man, the NFL draft, I think every year just surprises all of us with some of the things that happen. So I'm expecting that. I'm expecting some big surprises. But I'm excited. I'm excited that my team, the Seahawks, has a 5th pick and a 20th pick. It's been a while. It's been a while since they picked that.
That's some serious draft capital for the Seahawks.
I don't think Schneider and Carroll have ever picked as high as 5.
I think you're right. I think this might be their highest pick.
I think their first year, I think they took Russell Okung at 6, or the year before they took over. But they haven't had a 5th. And man, that top 5 right now, really the whole top 10. It's a lot of opportunity for trades and quarterback needs.
Absolutely.
Which quarterback's going to fall,
and you're going to see it. You're going to see a lot of movement, I think, within that first top 10. And kind of retroceding back to speak to, or piggyback on what you were speaking on, is scouting and NFL scouting, is fantasy scouting as well, even more so. But it's $1 billion business of missing. Like that's one of the kind of idioms I've been using throughout the draft process episodes. It's $1 billion business of missing. These guys are the best in the world at it and have been for decades, and are not very good at it. When you're talking about like just a historical perspective of hit rates and how many times a Mitch Trubisky goes ahead of a Patrick Mahomes or Deshaun Watson. It happens all of the time. But that also, almost from an economics perspective, just talks to cost equivalency. Like, taking a bet on a quarterback is always a good idea because you're never going to get that chance in that window. So whether it's 3rd, 10th, 15th, like whatever, you have to spend premium on them. So when you have those premium picks, and sometimes you got to trade up for them, it's a good idea. It's just really, nobody knows anything when it comes to what's between a player's ears and their dedication to be great. And like the Jalen Hurts of the world, who are literally like, I don't want a guaranteed contract because I want to be motivated every day to win a championship. That's where my bonuses are going to come from. Like that type of mentality is like, doesn't matter how well they do in interviews. Those things are what you call intangible. And it's obviously what truly makes a good prospect into a great NFL football player. And specifically the quarterback, it's leadership and so much of it is off the field and locker room stuff as well, like having your teammate trust in you so that you can make, or when you do make bad decisions, they're still there the next play, giving that 100% effort. And those are just things from a football mind perspective that even as an analyst, I can never take those things into consideration. And that's why I'm going to have misses, and we're all going to have misses, and the NFL draft is going to have misses. But I think there's a certain mentality that comes into play during draft season, especially in dynasty drafts, where it's like, I have to be right on every prospect. And I think that's a misnomer. I don't think you have to be right on every prospect, but you have to mitigate your risk and just be right on the prospects that you invest in, so to speak.
Yeah, no, I mean, I would agree. And I mean, it's one of those things where you've got a whole group of people, you and me included, that do a lot of our analysis of, the NFL draft, but games week to week, players, everything, largely from a fantasy football angle. And then you obviously have a lot of people out there doing it from a real NFL football angle. And the thing is like, and there's a little bit of a battle there. You see it on Twitter. You see comments like, "Oh, stick to fantasy," or
which I love that like you put it in quotations, because it is honestly like production.
Well, that's kind of what I'm getting at. It's similar to the argument film versus analytics. It's 100%. Like, yeah, it's like you need both, and and that's a pretty cliched answer to the question. Of course, you need both, but just because you need both, it doesn't take away from the people that are only doing analytics or only doing film. And I just think, especially now, I mean, like, fantasy football is not going anywhere, especially with the betting aspect of it, and how much money comes from fantasy football. And so, I think there's a benefit to listening to folks like us, but not when it comes to the NFL draft, but not as your only source of information. I mean, it helps to have the more angles people are coming from to look at this, the better. And personally, I'd love to be a film junkie and do all this analytics, but there are only 24 hours in the day.
Yeah.
And I don't have time to do that. So I choose to do what I enjoy. I'd largely stay out of the arguments about the two, like, because I know what I think. It's like, I think both are very important. I'm going to contribute to this one. Yeah, because that's what I like to do, and that's what I have time for. So, but yeah, the draft is it's a pretty, to me, it's a pretty special thing. Like it, as far as just the more general sports bringing people together, like our community, the fantasy community, just the NFL community. Yes, we argue about takes all day long, but man, we're months away from the last season and the start of the next season. But we are immersed in it because of this draft. Yes. And I also I have to remind myself, like, when Trevor Lawrence takes his helmet off, like, I'm no longer the same age as these people. Like, these are young kids now. You know what I mean? Because they're in helmets. I've been watching people in helmets since I was young. So it's easy to just think we're all the same. But, like, these are young kids, and a lot of them are fulfilling a lifelong dream.
Yep.
Whether that's just to get to the NFL or be a star. And I like to see that too. That's just
me too.
It's cool as a fan that succeed at things,
Exactly. As a fan, that's one of my favorite things as well, is generally just seeing players that I like fulfill that lifelong dream. And with something that you said in mind too, like, why don't we touch on a few of those processes and those analytics and the kind of our favorite sources of things that lead us to this exact date. For example, I've kind of touched on it on the pod a few times, so I'll bring up one of my favorite things for receivers is not necessarily receiving yards per team pass attempt, which can lead to a positive analytic profile when they hit above that 2.5 yard in best season threshold. But what I really like, and it correlates to a higher points per game in the NFL. Like, I've tracked it back for 14 years now, and I don't have quite enough time to go further. I will do so, but it correlates to a higher point per game, and that's receiving yards per team offensive play or per team attempt, however you want to write it out in your anagram. And what that does is over per team pass attempt tells you that not only is this receiver dominating the passing game specifically, he's dominating the entire offense. So they're not handing the ball off to a running back that's going to see 7th round, potentially undrafted, not be in the NFL capital, because this receiver is that much of a talent that they've literally catered their system into opening up more touches for him. Things like that kind of are an analytic that I find do almost what you were saying. That analytic adds that nuance that you get from film, where it's removing that, is it just a market share of the offensive game, not just a market share of the total offensive yards, but per team, like, how often is this player on the field really contributing to every play? And that's why that's one of those analytics that I really like.
That's one of my favorite. I actually I have a rookie database that I've been building since for a while, and I realized that column was missing. The best season. I just say yards per team play. I just go with yards per team play, but it's same deal. And yeah, you're right, because it's I think if you're explaining that to someone who doesn't necessarily live in analytics, a response might be, well, how often are any of these receivers rushing the ball anyway, blah, blah, blah. And it's true. I don't really heavily invest anything in how much a wide receiver, other than oh, hey, that guy got a bunch of carries, they like to give him the ball. Other than that type of qualitative type thing, I can see the response going there, but that's not what it's about. It's about it gets to the decision making of that team's offense. If a receiver's yards per team play as opposed to just within the passing game. I mean, like you said, receiving yards per team pass attempt is a valuable metric. But I feel like I say this in every single article I ever write, just because I just can't, none of these by themselves, none of these metrics that you might hear coming, especially during draft season, in and of themselves are the whole story. You know what I mean?
Right.
You've got to bring more into it. Do you know off the top of your head, by the way, who has the highest yards per team play?
Is it Marvin Mims?
Hold on one second. Best. Where did it go? It was right here.
I'm almost positive it's Marvin Mims.
Best yards per. Hold on. Let me turn off my dumb. Hold on. There they go. I have it as JSN.
Oh,
Jackson Smith, best yards per team play at 1.76. So anyway,
special.
But yeah, I very much look at yards per team play. I look at receiving yards per team pass attempt, yards per route run. I like targets per route run as well. You got to be careful with targets per route run, because they're what is the tight end this year? I think it's Darnell Washington. That if you look at his targets per route run, it's solid. It's well
because
above
they
average.
Only asked him to run a route when they designed a play to him.
It's when he's running routes, they're throwing it to him, but he's not running as many routes. So that's
exactly.
And that's a fairly simplistic one, but I mean that's exactly it right there. If you were just looking at targets per route run, there's value in it. There's value in targets per route run. Especially when you compare all these things we're talking to just things like yards per reception or touchdowns. You know what I mean?
Right.
But you got, there's just, and that's the thing. That's what happens. A lot of my process, as far as when I'm building spreadsheets and writing articles, I do not sit down with a nice outline of all the things I want to cover and hit them one by one and go. I come up with an idea, and I kind of just start writing about it, and then I honestly see where it takes me. I recently wrote an article for Fantasy Data. I was curious about, the common thought, oh, Dalton Schultz is going to Houston, and they're likely going to have a rookie QB, deer in the headlights, best friend's the tight end. That's good for Dalton Schultz. I was like, that makes logical sense, but is that true? Is that what these numbers actually say? So I went back real far, and it was a much bigger rabbit hole than I was planning to get into.
Those are the
but
best.
I just looked at, rookie quarterbacks and how the tight ends did with those rookie quarterbacks back to 2008, I think I went. And then how a tight end who is new to the team the same year the rookie takes over, how they have done. And what was funny about that study is I was looking at it from a lot of different angles. And for the most part, until I got to the very end, all the data was pointing to it was a slight bump. Tight ends did a little bit better compared to the previous season with the rookie. But then I got to a specific statistic, and it was not the case.
Right.
It was when you looked at because I was just looking at all tight ends that have been with rookies, and I just looked at, everybody. But if you just broke it down to the top 12, I think, top 12 or top 15 tight ends that have been in those scenarios, those guys, the guys we care about, the guys we're going to start in our lineups, they have not over time shown any kind of bump fantasy wise with a rookie.
Right.
But that's the thing is and I read back my article and I was like, man, reading this back, my tone the whole way is The answer is yes. The answer is yes. And then I got to the very end. I was like, the answer is no. You know what I mean? So it's like, that's where this stuff takes me, but I love it, you know?
Well, that you kind of hit on one of the most important points with analytics at the top of that is I think no one metric or analytic really tells the whole story, but it helps you narrow the tunnel and it helps you paint a better picture on how these players are going to do from a year-to-year perspective. And of course, being dynasty players as we are, that's what's important. It is obviously redraft has a play into it, and redraft will always be the mother that births the dynasty market, right? When players produce in season, they become really valuable redraft assets and then increase their dynasty value. It's a pretty simple give and take. With that said, what analytics do and these studies do, like these rabbit holes that you and I go down, and it helps us kind of narrow that window on players. It doesn't paint the picture fully, but it leaves us with just a few bushes and a bird, with just the finishing touches left, which obviously is then left up to variance, on-field play, a lot of those intangibles that we spoke about that we can't really calculate. And so with that, like with our processes kind of laid out in that narrowing of the tunnel, who do you think in this draft is going to be a surprise riser, somebody that you feel really ecstatic about if they were to increase their rookie profiles and kind of narrow that analytic profile with increased draft capital, or even conversely with poor draft capital?
So one guy that we've been talking about for a while at IBT, in between media, who, and I mean, I'm not a Debbie guy either, so I start looking at these rookies. I started looking at these rookies a couple months ago. I knew the big ones, you know what I mean? But like, I didn't know anything. I had not gone in depth on any of these rookies. So much like I'm not a draft expert, I'm well aware when it comes to rookie analysis, there very much could be stuff I'm missing. You know what I mean? Like, but there is a guy who athletically and across a lot of the metrics is very high, and that's Chase Brown, running back Chase Brown. I was looking at some mocks, some 7-round mocks yesterday, and he was day 3. He was a day 3 guy in most of the mocks I've looked at. I'm not saying I think Chase Brown should be day 1, necessarily, but he is one guy, and I said this a few weeks ago. There's a handful of guys where it seems analytically they're ready to burst.
Yeah.
And it's all going to depend on that draft capital.
Yeah.
And not in a vacuum. It's not like, oh, draft capital, so he's good. It's like there's a lot that goes into draft capital. That's the thing, is I think some people don't realize, like JJ Zacharyson, late round QB, talks about this a lot. Like the things that he doesn't necessarily talk about in his prospect guides, because they're already baked into that draft capital. Right. The NFL is telling us something with the draft capital. You know what I mean? So with Chase Brown, if he were to sneak into the 3rd round, I don't know how likely that is, but I mean, the dude was a freak. He has 3-down capabilities. He had athletically tests very high. The best season, things like best season touchdown share and rushing attempt share and those types of things. He was the guy. So he's a guy I'm watching closely. I'm really hoping he gets the draft capital. And if he does, let's just say he does, the people that have already done their rookie drafts and gotten him in the 3rd or 4th round of their rookie drafts, if that's what's been happening, are going to love it. So that's one guy.
I agree.
Another guy, I haven't dove as deep with this guy, and he seems to be climbing a little bit, and it's now former Cincinnati wide receiver Tyler Scott.
There's been a lot of buzz around Tyler Scott.
Yeah,
as well.
He's starting to get the buzz now. But he was a name I saw about a month ago. I can't remember if it was Ray GQ. This is what I'm talking about. I listened to people like JJ Zacharyson and Ray GQ. Kevin with Football Guys. I just totally spaced on his last name.
Kevin Coleman.
Yeah, what's that?
Kevin Coleman.
Oh, Du Bois at Du Bois.
Du Bois, yeah.
Yeah, is that okay?
That's my guy.
Yeah, no, he's great. Anyway, but that's the thing, and that's the other thing too. You got to, about when you're doing this type of analysis, one of the common pieces of advice you get. You see them, and I've seen a few threads recently, and I like seeing them. People giving advice to, hey, if you're just starting out, one of them is you can't try and do it all. You can't try and do everything, or else you're going to burn out. You just can't. So, but you just have to be willing to be like, hey, I'm willing to give you advice on rookies and drafts and stuff like that. And I'm also willing to tell you that I get a lot of my information from these other guys who do it a lot more. You know what I mean? Like,
I think that's
but there's nothing wrong
absolutely.
with it. There's nothing wrong with
Self-awareness
that.
is important, man.
There's this obsession with like it has to be your original thought. It's like no. I said it, like I put out a YouTube video November of 2020 when I first said, hey, at Twitter, I'm here. And I gave a little spiel about what my definition of analysis was, and it holds true today. It's like there's this giant pool of data out there. Some of it's more accessible than others, but it's out there and it's available for the most part for most people. It's picking how to organize it. It's picking what data to organize, what columns to put next to each other, and it's then choosing how to present that data and how to combine it in a way that tells a story. That's in a nutshell what it is.
Absolutely.
So, I mean, there's a lot of aspects from that are going to come from all the other people that have done it before. So anyway, I feel like I'm spending a lot of time like saying,
dude,
if I did something wrong, it's because I'm not actually an expert in that. It's not what I'm trying to do. It's not what I'm trying to do. But.
That was kind of the whole point of this process in this episode in these pre-draft predictions is I always want to be transparent with the process as much as possible, right? And when looking at specifically like these kind of sleeper prospects or these later round guys that need a bit of that draft capital bump to round out their profile, there's a lot of really great Devi resources and guys that do this work really early. And of course I pull from that and guys like at Du Bois 2022 or 22, who is a hardcore film grinder of college football and has an also logical and analytic mind. And there's great places and obviously come to us, Brodo Fantasy, like the player comps and Casanova with his incredible algorithms and in his data pages and our exclusive analytics and data. Like these are all great points to pull from, and I'm gonna like touch on it just a little bit further. Like I think it's a really running back heavy draft class, so kind of one of those reasons why it's important to pull as much information from as many sources as possible is, again, as you said, there's only so many hours in the day, man. This is a really deep class when it comes to running back prospects specifically, and a lot of guys are going to insulate their profile or increase their value significantly with draft capital. But with that said, I almost think it's like there's a supply and demand issue that may happen with these positive profiles that we like. Like I really like a Raheem Jarrett, a Tank Dell, who have some noticeable red flags, but really positive analytic profiles. Obviously a Tank Bigsby, should he get second round draft capital, even high third round draft capital rather, would solidify what is an incredibly promising profile from the SEC. But with it being such a running back heavy draft class, and you were, anticipating some positive profiles being rounded out with that second round, maybe third round draft capital, is it becoming now that it's like the fourth round is the new third round, where you're going to see very few positive hits in round 3? Round 2 is always going to be the running back. Round 1, right? You're going to see a lot fewer shots taken on these round 3 running backs, because you can kind of just wait around to that round 4 and get your Tyler Algiers, get your Damian Pierces, get your Izzy Abacondas this year, get your, potentially your Chase Browns, your all of these players that have almost equal positive upside, but cost a round less. And it's a theory and strategy that we've used in Dynasty several times. So like with that in mind, a running back potentially for you, like a bold take, maybe, who do you think is going to be a big faller, or who do you think is going to be maybe that fourth round running back that is really a day 3, day 2 guy, or round 3, round 2 guy, but gets pushed to that fourth round just because of the way that the market is reacting?
Let's see. Let me just take a little look see here. Well, I want to talk first. I want to talk about a guy that he's been a little bit polarizing, and I see it more as I think he's going to go higher than where I've seen him, and that's Devin Achane.
Okay.
And I think, and the reason, and this will be a timeless debate till the end of time, is his size as a running back and the historical success of running backs at his size. It's the same with Deuce Vaughn, except Deuce Vaughn also had a terrible combine. And, so there's other red flags there. But with the Kane, a couple different teams I've seen that I think would be super interesting for him to go to. And then you just have to start looking at when those teams draft. One of them is the Saints. And, I don't think he'd quite go. It'd be pretty bold, I think, to have a Kane going as high as pick 40 to the Saints right at the start of the second round. But I don't think Kamara is going to play much this year. I just don't see how that's. I think
his days in New Orleans are numbered.
Well, yeah, and I mean just with the looming suspension, and I think of a guy like a Kane who he's small, but he did show he's able to run between the tackles. But if he went to New Orleans, they've got one of the best football players in the history of the world, Jamal Williams, toting the rock now. And a Kane could step in and not be Kamara, but be in a similar role as Kamara. So I think that would be a good landing spot. And the other interesting landing spot I read for a Kane would be to the Broncos, because Sean Payton's at the helm there now.
Yeah.
And bring him in and do we don't know exactly when Javonte Williams is going to be fully healthy. I hope it's soon. I have a lot of shares and I really like him. He was one of those guys that I bought the dip when he was injured wherever I could. I kind of put some eggs, put some chips in the pot with him, and we'll see. But anyway, so and I mean that the Kane's not too much of he's not a bold take. There's plenty of people out there that have had him in their top 5, but I don't know. As far as him going early round 2, mid round 2, I'd say that's probably a little bold. I don't think that's super likely with someone like a Kane.
I would love to see it. I mean, that's what this show is about, man. I want the bold stuff. And I think a Peyton fit is perfect for a guy like a Kane. I think another perfect fit that, again, I think it's 52 or 54, which would be pretty high capital, but Mike McDaniel in Miami with a guy like Devin Kane's speed. Yeah. I mean, but for me, I want to see them use that capital and move up and get Jahmyr Gibbs.
Yeah. Now Jahmyr Gibbs, I'm on the Jahmyr Gibbs train and I mean like his there's always wild stuff that happens during draft week, wild predictions. People just start throwing stuff at the walls. Some of it is probably based in reality, some of it not. But this whole Jahmyr Gibbs is going to be taken ahead of Bijan Robinson in the draft. Again, we don't know what the NFL is going to do, but I don't think that's going to happen. No. So I mean his crazy predictions have gone in a positive direction, but with Gibbs, I think I think there's going to be 2 running backs selected in the first round.
Agreed.
No more than 2. I can't see more than 2 going to, but I think Gibbs will be selected near the end of the first round. I think he's a first rounder.
And that kind of brings me to my next little bit, favorite landing spots: Bijan, Gibbs, JSN. Hit me with your favorite landing spots.
I can see the show sheet, so I'm helping with these transitions.
I appreciate it.
No, I'm just kidding. Okay, Bijan I looked at probably the most, just because, again, I'm a fantasy guy, and I'm very excited for Bijan Robinson. I was this close to pulling the trigger on a trade a couple weeks ago to land the 101. I was probably overpaying for it. It was sitting there, and I almost had that moment of just accept, but I held back. It was a little too much. So anyway, I think there's multiple landing spots I would like to see. And I'll kind of go through it, maybe move through the first round, the teams that are potentially going to take him and whether I like that landing spot or not. I mean, the first team that, God bless him, my friend Hoove, he has planted his flag at HooveTube on Twitter. He has planted his flag, and Bijan is going 8 overall to the Falcons. He
might be right.
Betting his firstborn when that firstborn happens on it. No, he made a really funny bet with Herms, with our buddy Herms, about that. But anyway, and I mean, if he did go to the Falcons, that would be, I think, a somewhat ideal landing spot. I mean, they run. Tyler Algier would still be involved, But for as good as Bijan is, I don't think he's going to go anywhere and have a 100% running back rush share.
Right.
I don't think
Agreed.
that's going to happen. Like, you don't want to do that to a rookie. So as far as looking at landing spots where I'm not as concerned about the the incumbents, I think Atlanta would be a great fit. Atlanta's been making some moves, largely on defense so far this offseason, but they've been, sometimes there's some teams out there that, like, with some of the decisions they make, you wonder, do you care about winning? Like, does this franchise actually want to compete? You know what I mean?
They certainly do. Yeah.
But Atlanta does. They've got a mountain to climb. They're gonna put their trust in Desmond Ridder for now. I still don't think, I brought this up a few days ago. Again, I don't know how likely it is, but I don't know. I'm not sure why they haven't at least been discussed in that group of teams that would potentially make a move for one of these QBs.
Especially at 8.
Yeah, I mean, I get it. And I've been, people have shown me things that people have said about how all the talk around Desmond Ridder, and that's great. I'm rooting for Desmond Ridder. I'm rooting for him and Sam Howell and all the quarterbacks who fell last year. You know what I mean? Like,
it would be great to see all of them break every hit rate model.
Yeah. So Atlanta, I think it's probably not my favorite landing spot for Bijan, but I think it's a better than average landing spot. The next one on the list is, much rumored Philadelphia.
Philly.
10.
That's my spot.
Yeah, I mean, that is a good spot. That's a great spot. I mean, obviously, it's one of the best offenses in the league.
I think
Very
it's
good
actually
offensive line.
Bad spot for him.
What's that?
I think it's actually a bad spot for him a little bit. Like, I think with Jalen Hurts rushing as much as he did, and
that's what
completely nuking Miles Sanders' receiving value as well.
That's what I was going to get to, is, like, on paper, upon first glance, the Eagles were just like, oh yeah, smash for the best running back prospects, and Saquon Barkley, maybe better than Barkley. Yeah, but you're right. I haven't done it yet, but one little thing I'm going to do soon is just look up when a team's quarterback rushes for a certain amount of touchdowns. And again, we're getting, it's touchdowns, so it's not really in the weeds. But when that happens, what's the highest that team's running back has finished? In the top 12, top 24, all that kind of stuff. Because no matter how you slice it, even if you say, well, they'll want to stop Jalen Hurts from rushing for so many touchdowns, keep him healthy. It's like, that's smart, but it's Jalen Hurts. He's still going to rush for some touchdowns. And if we're only looking at it from what is the best landing spot,
right,
for him in fantasy football, I don't think Philadelphia is the best landing spot. I was a Rashad Penny truther for quite some time. I'm not, I kind of view Rashad Penny as a little bit similarly to Tyler Algier. It's somebody that's there, that's going to get work and is going to provide depth, but it wouldn't be Rashad Penny that's going to dampen Bijan Robinson's fantasy value, in my opinion. It would be Jalen Hurts.
Agreed.
So the next one that I kind of like, and this would kind of depend, is the Chargers. That's 21. That's another one I've seen. I mean, it would, it's based on the rumors that Eckler wants a trade. So, I mean, hypothetically speaking, if Eckler was gone and Bijan went there, I mean, that's a smash for me. That might be my favorite landing spot, with a young star quarterback. I mean, and Eckler, it's been a little bizarre. Their model for the way they use their running backs is a little different. They've always led the league the last 4 or 5 years, whenever Eckler's healthy, in running back target share. Their running back target share is always at the top. It's because of Eckler. He's not asked to do as much on the ground as other perennial top 5 running backs. It's kind of crazy, actually, how well Eckler, God, what a story Eckler is. I love that guy. He's an undrafted dude, small, and he's just just top 5 running back. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and then they've just struggled through a bunch of meh RB2s
that can't get more than 2.5 yards up the top. Yeah.
I'm forgetting the other one's names, which
they're not worth remembering.
Case in point. So I think that would be, that would be a great landing spot. Dallas is another one that's been thrown out there quite a bit without Zeke. And I'm not going to lie. I think as much as I want Pollard to just be this workhorse, that's not what Dallas has told us. Dallas has not used Tony Pollard like that. He's always, he's I don't think he's ever been above a 50% running back rush share with them. And I don't think they're going to change that up, So, because what I forecast for Dallas, they are a team that possibly could get Bijan if he's still there. If they don't, I think they're a likely team to pick one of these other, bigger, more two-down backs that are in this pool a little bit later in the draft, like Charbonnet or who are some of the others? That's the direction they could go, I think, if they don't get Bijan.
Charbonnet, Bigsby, I think, are both heavily mocked.
Yeah, Bigsby, that was the other one. I'm staring at it right now.
Yeah, I mean, I think the hottest landing spot for Bijan, the hottest take, is probably that Atlanta at 8, if not Philly at 10. And it's a combination of obviously the height of the pick being a top 10, but also the polarizing landing spots, as we both mentioned. With that said, I think my favorite spot, and you hit it on the head, you got to it before I did, is the Chargers at 21. He's not making it out of the first round. I guarantee you that. I mean, if he gets to the point that Kansas City or the Bengals or Philly with their other first round pick are staring him in the face again at the back end of the draft, like, he will not make it out of the first round. With that said, I think I have a pretty hot take for a landing spot that is both positive and unexpected, especially now that the trade has went through. And I think this might have been a hitch as to why the trade wasn't going through, and maybe they were waiting for a little bit more info to see who was drafting. I think JSN's going to the Jets at 13. I think that's the spot. I think that's the hot take spot for JSN. I think Gibbs to the Chiefs makes so much sense. Why wouldn't you want a supercharged Jerick McKinnon?
I like that one.
So I think that one makes a lot of sense. Bijan's the biggest question mark for me, in all honesty, out of all of them, because for me, if JSN is probably going to go in that top 15, it's positive landing spots for him all over the place, in my opinion, in that top 15. Everybody needs receiver help in that area. There's lots of quarterback questions, but obviously, again, we're told to trust the talent. I think you can with JSN for sure. That's why I think that Jets at 13 is probably a really hot spot. It'd be interesting to see him make it past Chicago and some of these other teams, but yeah. Gibbs, if he gets first round, it's probably going to be back end. So you're thinking Cincy or Kansas City. Yep, but the other one, I think you kind of mentioned it already, and as did I. Kansas City or Miami for Jahmyr Gibbs seems to make a whole lot of sense to me in that 40 to 52 range.
Yeah. I mean, just to round off Bijan, Buffalo has been a rumored team.
They always are.
Yeah, they always are. I don't know how I feel about that one, though. It's just because at a certain point, the history shows running backs, and I mean, they've never had a Bijan Robinson, so, don't hate me. But it hasn't been shown. It's a little bit similar to Jalen Hurts. It just hasn't been shown to produce these massive workload running backs. And they got James Cook, so we'll see. One that I like, I don't know if it'll happen. I don't know what's happening with Mixon. The charges that were dropped have been reintroduced. It's misdemeanor charge. So I don't know if there's any kind of suspension coming. His dead cap money is like $5 million, I think, less than his cap hit. It's not
crazy.
Yeah, his dead cap money, he could be, he could be somebody that's cut. And even if that doesn't happen, that wouldn't disclude the Bengals taking Bijan at 28. But if it did, I mean, that is another, to me, ideal scenario would be Bijan taking the place of Mixon in Cincinnati. Because obviously that's a team on the rise. Orlando, they just signed a top level offensive lineman. They're the days of, you remember the memes where it's like you have Burrow and then you have no one, Jamar Chase.
Yeah.
He's getting sacked.
Incomplete pass. Yeah.
Now it's like Burrow. What's the offensive tackle's name that they just signed?
Orlando Brown.
Orlando Brown. I kept wanting to say Orlando Bloom, but that's not the right guy.
No.
So with him and then Chase catching the ball, you know what I mean? So I mean, that's just a team on the rise, one of the most exciting, best offenses in the game. And then Mixon, while he was there, had a very healthy,
career years. Yeah.
I mean, Mixon, for all the hate, I mean, he wasn't a very effective runner, but he had a 15% target share last year.
Yeah.
He was involved. Bijan in that offense would go ham. I just don't think he's still going to be there at 28.
That's going to be the issue for sure. If they want it, they might have to move up. I think as well with the Cowboys, if they want it, they might have to move up. For me, kind of rounding out favorite landing spots and kind of hot takes for landing spots is I don't think Quentin Johnson gets in the first round. I don't
Ooh,
think he's
wow,
a
that's
first round
spicy.
wide receiver prospect, and I think the NFL agrees with me. That's my
Okay.
hot take. I think he goes real early second, which kind of just benefits some of those teams that were in the first. They can go defense and then hope, that also leaves that space for Josh Downs, Zay Flowers. I guess that's the point I'm trying to make, is I think Quentin Johnson is much closer to Josh Downs and Zay Flowers than he is to Jordan Addison or JSN. Obviously, my favorite probably landing spot, I think, with just, it might be a little bit of a slower regression. I'm going to mention this team again, but I love the quarterback that much. Jordan Addison to the Chargers as Keenan Allen's eventual replacement, and just continuing that run of incredible slot production that they've had for literally well over a decade is, I think that makes so much sense for them. And the Chargers are historically a team, and you've seen them try to do it with these mediocre running back prospects, knowing Eckler's career arc, but they are historically a team that try to backlog talent. They did it with Mike Williams as well, obviously a little bit with Josh Palmer. So I think that would be an incredible landing spot for Jordan Addison's full career arc, but a little bit of a disappointment maybe for his rookie season production.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really have any problem with that Quentin Johnston take. He's one of those receivers that he just kind of scares me. It's like when I do my, rudimentary draft prospect rankings, I'm pretty normal with it to start with. I'm JSN, Jordan Addison. But then I kind of just have a spot that's there for him just because that seems like where he's going. But then I start looking at Zay Flowers and Josh Downs and some of these other guys, and I'm like, do I put him before or after them? But I could see it. I mean, it's that is one thing. He's the type of he's the exact type of receiver where analytically there's red flags, athletically there's a monster ceiling, but he's seen as being pretty raw, not a super diverse route tree, but it's always hard to tell because the NFL loves those big athletic receivers.
They love them.
You know what I mean? So, but is he going to go the way of a first rounder, or is he going to go the way of somebody he's actually been comped to a little bit? Or is he going to go in second like Christian Watson or DK Metcalf? Is he going to be one of those guys that falls to the second round? We'll see. He is likely, for me personally, based on where he would, even with this fluctuation, what is he, the third, fourth, fifth receiver off the board? He is a guy I will end up with absolutely no shares of.
I'm
not going to be willing to take him where he's going to go.
Yeah, and
I guess tells the story of my rankings.
Right.
That's over him. So I guess maybe I
think he's kind of in a tier of his own in that sense, where he has intangible upside that, I mean, it's calculated. The upside is there. There are certain things that he's really positive in, and in kind of, you could quote unquote elite in, but the red flags are also, they're rearing their ugly head. They are not hiding by any means. You don't have to dive very deep into his profile from a film or analytic perspective to see that there's some issues there. With that said, again, that if you're going to make that bet, it's for that upside. It's not for the safety of that pick at 107, 108. And that's why I have him a little bit behind these other guys that are more analytically rounded as well. So I don't think it's actually that much of a hot take. And again, if he gets that draft capital, it's certainly not a death knell. Like if he's picked 40th, it doesn't ruin his profile. But I don't think he was ever going to get the Drake London draft capital where you can ignore the red flags. Once Drake London was drafted in the top 10, it was like, oh, who cares about the drops in contested catch percentage? Because every single top 10 wide receiver that had a freshman breakout like that is 6'3" and 215 pounds, has had multiple wide receiver one seasons, literally all of them. So when you're talking about making positive bets, Quentin Johnson isn't going to get the draft capital that makes those red flags go away.
Yeah. No, it's interesting you bring up Drake London. I remember I was arguing in a Twitter chat about Drake London last year. And I made the mistake of saying, but he's a first rounder without qualifying it. And I got ripped to shreds with all the, somebody so-and-so called, all the different first round receivers that have been bust.
The John Rosses, the Henry Ruggs.
Okay. Listen, if you add in, a fair amount of actual metrics that Drake London possesses, this is a really good thing for Drake London. And if Atlanta hadn't been like allergic to throwing the football last year, he would have had a much bigger season. He started off huge. I mean,
incredible.
He still, for a rookie, he had great peripherals. He had great peripheral statistics. It's just it didn't translate into a lot of fantasy success because there wasn't enough volume.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the third highest rookie target share in the history of the NFL. The guy
Yeah,
is an
yeah.
absolute baller. And I understand you can start arguing volume, but I would argue that even on 25 pass attempts per game or whatever Atlanta capped out at, that over a 17 game season, that's a large enough sample size to say that Drake London is a legit baller.
Yeah.
And you know, a little slightly off topic, but I do think that Quentin Johnson is probably, or Drake London rather, is probably Quentin Johnson's highest ceiling comps. And what made that profile so positive, where you could, stamp your seal of approval on it and say, this is a top 5 rookie pick, regardless of format. I don't think you're going to be able to do with Quentin Johnson, or, I mean, for that matter, like Josh Downs is a very, very impressive analytic profile. I think he's more of a second round, third round guy, even. Zay Flowers, a lot of first round talk. Again, I think there's only 2 first round running backs and 2 first round receivers. That's a prediction I will plant my flag on. It's Jordan Addison, JSN, Bijan, and Gibbs. And Gibbs, obviously, as we've mentioned many a times, is probably closer to that Miami range, or that Saints range in that 40 to 50.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, I would tend to agree. I mean, for me, what I think could be a surprise for people like you and me with the first round receivers is I do think there's a chance Quentin goes in the first round just because of that size.
Oh, for sure.
Because of that.
I could be
And
very
then-
wrong. These are both.
And then, I mean, there could be, a team could see Zay Flowers higher than we do. So he's got a chance. And then the other guy, just because we've seen it before, we saw Henry Ruggs go as the first
Hyatt.
quarterback wide receiver off the board that year, is Jalen Hyatt.
Yep.
That speed could catapult him into the first round. And again, that's that whole like, well, the NFL, and if an NFL team looks and they're like, this is our only chance to get this guy, and we're not looking at fantasy football because somebody like Jalen Hyatt isn't one of my favorite receivers from a fantasy standpoint, but I understand the value of that to an NFL team.
Yes.
So, I wouldn't be able to knock it. Like,
but I would,
that is a place where you can be like, well, okay, fantasy people, shut up. We want this guy that can stretch the field, know. So,
but this is when it really breaks into that fantasy theory where, fantasy, what it's ultimately trying to do is value production, and elongated production will insulate value over time. In Dynasty, that's pretty obvious, right? But that's why there's that weird divide that I don't think should exist in the first place in the NFL. And I guess I would obviously have to quantify it and do a little bit more studies, but is it more valuable to have a guy that can take safeties 40 yards in a straight line, but never, earn targets or never put up major production? Or is it more valuable to have a Justin Jefferson who runs a 4.54, be able to cut routes at anywhere on the field, but not necessarily ever get a target over 20 yards? Like, so, that's, and obviously Justin Jefferson, again, a first round draft pick, but who went right ahead of him?
I know who it was.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
Jalen
Reagor.
Yeah,
exactly. And for what exact reason? Is he had incredible speed, size, and athleticism. Gonna not helmet scout a bit, but it's really weird how close Jalen Reagor and Quentin Johnson are analytically as prospects. They got a lot of that 2.9 receiving yards per team pass attempt and 0.03 receiving yards per team play. Why are they handing the ball off to Kendry Miller so much if Quentin Johnson's a better prospect? Like, I'm just saying.
Yeah, it's a legitimate question. I am going to helmet scout a little bit and say JSN is going to be really good.
Yeah, well, that's fair. I mean, there has been and it's going to last well into 2024 with probably 2, I would assume 2, definitely into 2025 as well. You're talking about a pipeline of a school in Ohio State that is going to produce no less than 5 first-round NFL wide receivers in a 3-year span.
Yeah. Well, and I still stand by, if Paris Campbell hadn't gotten the injury bug early in his career, he'd be
Paris
Campbell,
in the conversation. Terry McLaurin, Curtis Samuel as well with the injury bug. Obviously, Curtis Samuel, a dynamic player. Michael Thomas, like it's Ohio State. You're allowed to be like, oh, those receivers are going to do well.
It's crazy.
Yeah, it's a pretty impressive pipeline. We're getting kind of close to that end, but I want to hear your hottest, or even like, give me one best, worst, or your hottest take. Like, who's going to be the best QB and the worst QB of this class? Who's going to be the best wide receiver? Give me your hottest, best, and worst.
Okay, first I want to start with Anthony Richardson, because hot topic. Yes. So here's, I think as a person that needs to be objective when it comes to analysis, let's put it this way. I give my best effort to be as objective as possible. There's no way bias is going to stay out of it. Sometimes take luck. I'm guilty of it sometimes. I decide I don't like somebody like Will Levis, and it might take a little while if he ends up being good to convince me. Anyway, so there's that side of me, and then there's the Homer, the Seahawks fan side of me. There's the top 5 picks are gonna be a lot of fun, I think, in this draft. A lot of people think Richardson in the Seahawks world, that's a little bit too risky, raw quarterback. I personally would love it so much if the Seahawks took Anthony Richardson if he's still there at the 5th overall. I would love it. And the way I look at it is like there's a lot of risk, and it's the first top 5 pick they've had in like 15 years. And what if you blow it and he ends up being nothing? But you know what? At the same time, like this planet could be gone in 5 years. You know what I mean? It's like
the Kyle Shanahan answer. I don't even know if we'll be alive on Sunday.
We'll see what happens. But like if he does hit, think about how much fun that dude is going to be to watch in the NFL. So I think he'll go top. I think he will go top 5, and I think he deserves to go top 5 just because of that ceiling. I'm not sitting here saying he's ready to play yet, but like there's been plenty of people that have been drafted and not played their first year. I mean,
yeah.
It's a little bit scattered, but Aaron Rodgers, Patrick Mahomes are 2 examples of
there's
quarterbacks that were
Trevor
taken.
Lawrence.
They didn't really play. Well,
because whatever they were doing down in Jacksonville was not football.
Jacksonville 2021 was a fever dream for all of us. But,
yeah, exactly. It didn't exist.
It didn't really happen. Yeah, it was a Black Mirror episode.
Yeah, 100%.
So that's not necessarily really a hot take. I just wanted to give a little pitch.
I think that's actually pretty nice.
Come out and tell everybody how excited I will be if that's the way it falls. And it's one of the, I'm not a bettor. I don't know the odds necessarily what's going on with these picks, but I know that's at least one potential landing spot for Mr. Richardson. Let's see. Best. I mean, I'm not a big QB. Like I focus a lot on running backs and wide receivers in my analysis. I also do, and I look for similar, useful, and sticky and metrics with signal, as they say, with tight ends and quarterbacks. I'm not going to ignore it. Plus, it's just like there's a whole data set out there. Why would I ignore it? Like I can dive into it and build it. Like why would I ignore that? But I don't think Will Levis is going to be a successful NFL quarterback. I don't think he should go. I mean, I've seen now with all this nonsense around CJ Stroud, same thing that happened to Justin Fields, like similar things, just like, it's like Hillary's emails getting leaked right before the election. It's like, if Stroud gets passed on and Levis goes too, I mean, God help that team. Whether it's Houston or whether it's a trade, I don't see it. I just don't see it. And I mean, it's not just about the mayonnaise and the eating bananas and stuff. I mean, there are personality red flags. Can't necessarily judge somebody through a TV screen, but he comes off as the kind of guy I wouldn't really be that into, like pretty full of himself, all that kind of stuff. And again, I'm kind of doing to him what people are doing to Stroud, so I'm gonna walk it back a little bit. But I just don't think. I mean, he's got a rocket arm and he's big and he's strong. I don't see it. I don't see a top 10 quarterback with Will Levis.
Neither do I.
And I mean, that's also he's a somewhat polarizing guy too. There's a developing Levis hive, and then there's a Levis haters, because that's the terminology we use, haters and hive. But you know what I mean. So I'm on the side that I don't see it. So if he goes top 10, I think it's a mistake. Running back. So a running back I dove into a little bit. Another polarizing running back that, man, could go in the 2nd round, could go in the 6th, is Zach Evans out of Ole Miss.
There we go.
So I brought up a rookie profile for IDT on him, so that kind of forced me to get a little bit more in the weeds on him. And it's a prickly path with that guy. He's got some things you really like, but then there's also some very bright red flags. My take on him is, he doesn't have the greatest college profile, especially. I mean, he came out of high school like
the greatest running back.
I mean, he was. Everybody wanted Zach Evans.
Zach Evans out of high school was arguably like the greatest high school running back prospect we've ever seen.
Yeah. So it's unfortunate it went the way it did. I don't know what happened behind the scenes, why he ended up transferring. He did get outplayed
by Quinshawn Judkins.
By a freshman this past season. People like to say he lost his job to Kendrick. What's that?
Quinshon's only a 3-star recruit too. Like he wasn't really on
Yeah,
anybody's map.
I'm curious to ask the Devi guys about that dude. Like, because he smashed this year. Like,
Yeah, I
I
mean,
only saw it because I was researching
I got to
Evans.
toot my own horn a little bit, but I did get 100% exposure just because I was like, look, if he got outplayed by Kendre Miller and is now transferring to the Ole Miss where the SEC schedule is even tougher, I was like, there's a good chance that this freshman kid just wipes Zach Evans off the face of the planet. And well, that was a good bet that I made. And I know
Yeah,
nothing about Devi, but it was literally just a name on a depth chart that I was like, there's a good chance that this happens again.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, I think Evans has the talent. I think the talent is there. I think he could, but that's the problem. It's like, I think it might be there. I think he could be this. It's potentially this, but it's just, there's really not a lot to go on because of what he went through in college. I mean, he did, when he played well the year he played before Kendre Miller. And Kendre Miller took over because he got hurt.
Right. Yeah.
And then I was talking to somebody about that, because a lot of people are like, oh, he lost his job. He lost his job twice in college. And I'm like, well, he didn't really lose it. He got hurt and somebody else took it. And then the response to that was, well, I see the fact that he transferred means he lost the job.
Right. I mean, that's kind of was the narrative that I was attaching to it a little bit as well.
Yeah. So I don't know. It could just be, I don't know, maybe I just developed this weird little liking of him when I was studying him. And I want to see that however many yards he rushed for in college, like 5,000 yards or something like that.
Yeah.
Or I think it was even more than that. Maybe I just want to see him succeed. But he's kind of an anomaly in this draft to me. Like I said, I've seen him 6th round. I've seen him 2nd round. So my, I guess, hot take with him, I think it's going to be higher than lower. That's with Zach Evans. I think there's going to be an NFL team that likes him enough to, maybe 4th round, maybe 3rd round. I don't know.
Yeah, I think Zach Evans legitimately might go undrafted. So I'll match your hot take with the
fine.
other polar.
That's fine. That's good. That's good.
I mean, with that, I think that was a pretty good setup for my last thing before we close this out. One rookie that you can't leave your drafts without, whether you're trading up for him or you're already in the spot for him. One rookie that you have to have this year.
Oh man.
Your Vontae Mack, so to speak.
Yeah. Well, my cop-out answer is somebody I'm very, very high on. It's not going to be a groundbreaking thing, but I really, really think he's going to be good as Gibbs.
I love it.
And I mean, he's right in that spot. Like, there's been a lot of talk about the different, picks 1 through 4, you're in a good spot. Pick 4 in Superflex is a great spot to be.
It's
because
beautiful.
You're either going to probably get
you
a
just get
quarterback you want,
whatever's
or
left.
you're going to get JSN,
Yeah.
So, and then once you get to like 6, 7, it's like, that's not a good place to be. I disagree. I actually kind of like that area of the draft because I really like both Gibbs and I also really like Jordan Addison.
I think he's I want to leave every draft with Addison.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think if you're picking 106, 107, 108 in that general range, it depends on if somebody goes for Levis. It depends on.
I hope they do.
I'm going to be, me personally, in the drafts where I'm at like 107, I'm going to be sending messages to my league mates. Like, did you see that catch Quentin Johnson had in that one game? Oh, you should definitely take him.
Facts, me too.
You know what I mean? Because in that range, I think whether you end up with a Jordan Addison, a Gibbs, I mean, even a little bit, in that same general spot as Zay Flowers, I think those are some pretty good, relatively speaking. If you look past, again, I haven't done this either, but if you look back at all the last 5 drafts or whatever, the 106 to 109 range and who went, I think Jordan Addison and Jahmyr Gibbs being in that pool potentially. I mean, Gibbs could be gone. Gibbs could be gone by 5 or 6. But if he's in that pool,
it's a good pool.
That's pretty solid. I mean, there's been a lot of talk about, the 23 class was seen as this just juggernaut class, and then now we're here and everybody wants to trade away their picks, and it's like
it happens every year.
It's every year. This is a good class. Like I think people are a little over. It's more of they've overcorrected with kind of fading this wide receiver class in general. I think people have gotten too used to Jamar Chase and Justin Jefferson coming out and just like lighting the world on fire. But I mean, you got to remember Justin Jefferson was not seen as this like top end.
Jalen Reagor was going ahead of him everywhere. 100%.
Yeah, when he came out. So I think, I mean, the running back class is deep. Wide
Very
receiver class, okay, maybe it's not quite up to what it's been. Maybe JSN isn't like the best wide receiver one prospect, but I honestly, last week wrote up JSN, and he had been written up so many times that I just was like, I got to figure out a different route here. I want to look at different stuff than what's been looked at. And so I got down in the weeds with his ADOT and his yards after catch and who he was like, as far as yards after catch, there's like a top 10 list. And in that top 10 list in this class for yards after catch, the average slot rate was 17%, and he was 88%. And he still was the top 10 in yards after the catch. So, stuff like that, just like trying to shoot down the slot rate knock, that kind of thing. So I don't know, man. I really like this. I really like this class.
Me too.
I like the top end. I like the top 3 QBs a lot. Bijan, I can't wait to watch that dude play in the NFL. I can't wait to watch him play in the NFL. So,
well, shout out what else you're working on while we wrap this up.
Oh, okay. So I'm with In Between Media. Been with them for a while. So I write a regular column series in the regular season. It's bi-weekly now. It's I think once a month or so. It's called the Mondays. So much like the other articles at IBT, it kind of combines life anecdotal, basically me just kind of talking about the stuff I've been through and offering any advice I can. Then, as well as I can, segue into fantasy football discussions of various topics. So I have that, and then I have a silly YouTube series called Pulp Fantasy with my good friend Ariel at Trash Sandwiches on Twitter. She joined me, it's been, I don't know, about 10 months. I did it solo for a couple of years, and then she joined me, and it's just been a blast. She's great.
So much fun.
So I do that, and then I'm a co-host on the IBT Fantasy Football Podcast. We have a lot of fun. And then, I write for Fantasy Data. I write a regular series called Beneath the Surface, Fantasy Football Beneath the Surface. And yeah, man, I was blown away that got nominated for.
It was well deserved, my friend.
It was funny because I was just like, it was one of those things where I was so just like, holy crap, I can't believe I was even nominated. But then the day of the announcing, I was like, dude, I want to win this really badly.
Yeah, of course. You're competitive, man.
Yeah. So I write that. And so hats off to Fantasy Data. They basically allowed me to start writing this article where I just choose. This is my biggest outlet for diving down rabbit holes and trying to present it to people in a useful, actionable, and understandable way. That's not a Twitter thread. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, it's and the fact that I wrote one of those every week during the season, I still don't know how I did it. But nowadays I'm writing 1 or 2 a month, and the topics vary. I try and just pick something that, I'm hoping is interesting, but isn't a really well-known topic. That's kind of what I go for. But I really just like dig into the numbers and try and unearth stuff out of them. So been writing that for a while. And then I also have a Patreon, Under Difflin Patreon. Most of the stuff I put on there is free. But basically anything I post on Twitter, a lot of the stuff I put into my Fantasy Data articles, I summarize it all in the articles and on Twitter, but all the raw data, all the spreadsheets, everything that goes into it, I just put it on my Patreon. People want to go check it out. So I have that as well.
Oh, you definitely got to go check out his stuff. We really appreciate having you on, man. This has been so much fun. We ran a little bit over, but I couldn't.
Sorry about that. I get
talking to you. No, I'm guilty. Like I'm a good ranter as well.
Yeah.
And if you want more of these rants and more of this information and more of this content, please consider going over to patreon.com/brotofantasy. You can subscribe for as little as $3 a month. You get access to an extra podcast a week, waiver rankings, the DFS optimizer in season. We do betting content all season throughout the Discord in there, whether it be Major League Baseball, basketball, all of that stuff. Obviously, NBA playoffs kicking off right now. And you can follow me at PsychWardFF. Please go to @BrotoFantasy, @BrotoFFJ, @BrotoFFMike, @BrotoFFTim. We got the whole army. @BrotoFFCasanova, who is our data analyst, cooking up all of the hot comps and draft content for you guys. Much love, much respect. Thanks for tuning in.